I'm not going to write the whole class, everything, right? I'm just going to write main. Is everybody okay with that? Okay. So we're going to have a main. Obviously, at some point, we did the proper imports. Import scanner, import file, import whatever. Okay? So I guess I'm going to do it this way. I am going to do it this way on purpose. Sorry. Okay, so a couple things here. Number one, you will need to import java.io because the file class is in java.io. If I come back here, I'm not putting the screen down, but if I unblink the screen and I show you the file class, notice that the file class is in java.io right there. Okay? So java.io, we will need to import that to have a file object. Okay? Likewise, since we're going to use the scanner, and I'm just going to cheat here, and I'm going to say import java.io.splat. Okay? The splat, or the asterisk, says give me all the classes inside of that. Are you telling me to hurry it up, Garrett?
Oh no, I was just like hand motioning it, yeah.
I was going like this, I'm thinking, am I talking too slow? Because I can talk a lot faster than this.
We know,
I was
we know.
just like,
You don't do that.
it was just like.
By the way, way off the subject of this for a minute. But some people last night, and there were a handful, half dozen or so, posted into Canvas their homework and said, I am clueless, but I'm still trying. I saw that at least 9 or 10 times last night, right? If you're clueless, please come see me. It is really not in my intention, unless your name's Blaine, for you to be in this class completely lost, right? Hi, Blaine. How you doing? Okay. It is not my intention for you to be in this class completely lost. I always lose people at a raise, but you need to step up, for lack of a better word, and come see me. Go to the tutors. Go to the plus group. And I'm not going to call out anybody, and I know who they were. I don't want you to be lost. I know you all think I am evil and I have a black heart, and I'm probably Satan incarnate, which I am, but don't tell anybody. I actually want you to succeed in this class. I would love to give 68 4.0s or A's at the end of the course. I would love to be able to justify that I give 68 A's, right? Typically what's going to happen is of those 68 people or 65 people or whatever you want to say, you're going to have a third that are going to get an A, a third that's going to get from a C plus to an A minus, and a third that's going to fail. Because that's how this course goes, right? So it means somewhere in the course of this course, I will end up probably failing 20 people, and that's just historical numbers, right? I don't want to fail 20 people, but historically that's the way this course is always run. And that's because students get lost, and they start drowning, and the moment they start drowning, they give up and they drown, and then they stop coming to class, right? I actually want you to succeed. I really, really, truly do. So please, if you're stuck, you're lost, whatever, come see me, and I will help you. We'll get some resources. We'll see what we can do. Okay, I'm going to import java.util.scanner here. Okay? I'm going to make my class public class file stuff, and then I'm going to make my main public static void main string args. Okay? So one of the things I'm going to have to do now, and this because of the scanner, so I'm going to come back here to the scanner for a minute, and I'm going to turn the projector on after I show you this. Okay? So kind of aside for a moment, as you look here, it says that a scanner object that is wrapped around a file will throw a file not found exception. Okay, so you need to know, this is way look ahead to 211, there are two types of exceptions in the world of Java. Okay? There are two types of exceptions. There's an exception called a checked exception.
Is that the throw illegal thing?
No, it is not. And then there is an unchecked exception. Okay? The difference is this, very simply. The compiler cares, the compiler does not care. compiler does not care on an unchecked exception. Meaning, if you have an unchecked exception, it will crash your program. Illegal argument exception, runtime exception, array index out of bounds exception are all unchecked exceptions, right? And what it simply means to be an unchecked exception is I don't have to worry about it. I'm just going to let it crash my program. On the other hand, the compiler cares about checked exceptions. And it says specifically that if you have a checked exception, then you have to deal with it in some fashion. And you can deal with it in one of two ways. You can handle it right there with what you used to do in Python, very similar to it. It's called try-catch in Java. You guys did try-except in the Python world, right?
I forgot now.
Yes, no, maybe so. You guys all believe it. Right?
I-
Or you can propagate it. Essentially, you can kick the can down the road. Not my problem, hot potato, here you go, Blaine, you deal with it. And Blaine goes, screw that, here you go, system, you deal with it, and it's gonna eventually crash your code. But you have to deal with it in some fashion. You have to specifically say, I'm not gonna handle this here, I'm gonna get rid of it. And to do that, on the method header of main, where we're gonna open our file and do a bunch of stuff, you will need to put, if I don't already put it for you, the word throws, which is different than throw.
Wait, throw like illegal argument exceptions.
No, just let me finish, please. Throws exception, okay? Now, when I give you the main, it will automatically have it on there, but what we're doing is we're essentially kicking the can down the road. If we get this, it's gonna still crash our program, but we know specifically it's gonna crash our program, right? Illegal argument exception, we may or may not get. We know it's gonna crash our program, we may or may not get. But in this case, we're really putting throws exception on the method header of main to shut the compiler up, okay? And I will show you this in code, probably not today because I won't have time, maybe today, but I will show you this in code, okay? So we have our main, and so now what we're gonna do is in our main, we're going to ask the user to enter a scan or to enter a file name. So we're going to create our scanner for the keyboard, okay? Because we still need to read stuff from the keyboard. So we're going to create our scanner object for the keyboard. We still need to be able to read from the keyboard, okay? And we're going to say file INF. INF just is Stu's way in his feeble little crazy mind to stand for input file, right? That's all it stands for. INF just simply stands for input file as a file object, okay? That's all it means. Input file is a file object, okay? Gets file utils dot open input file, and we're going to pass it to scanner, okay?
Is that INF or INT?
INF. Or INT, I don't really care. You know it can be INT because int's a protected word, right? Okay. So over here now we're going to write the file utils for the open input file method. So what we're going to do is we're ultimately going to presume we have a file called nums.txt, okay? Let's see how fast we can do this. Let's just run down the row, give me a number, and keep going, right? So Aiden?
5.
What?
5.
5?
Set go fast.
Keep going. Person behind him. Keep going.
6. 7.
Thank you.
20. 25.
What?
25.
Okay.
15.
Okay. Okay.
1.
It's really not that hard, people. You're just giving me numbers. I like 25 numbers. So whoever's next, 8, whatever. Keep going. Hello,
12.
crickets. What?
4.
Thank you.
-1.
Thank you.
76.
5,803.
803 is all I heard. Okay, next.
22.
-40.
11.
Hi.
17.
38.
Okay, let's call that good. Just simply because I can't stand you guys trying to decide what number, how long it takes you, right? Anybody been in the military at all? Count off, right, Blaine? It's not that freaking hard. Okay, so we're gonna open the input file. So over here, we're gonna obviously need to import java.io.splat again, because we're gonna make a file object over here.
Oh, we're making a new thing?
We're gonna need to import java.util.scanner. Okay. Public class file utils. Okay. And then this method is a static method or a non-static method.
It's static.
And we know that because of
It's referencing the class.
class names referencing it, so we're gonna return here a public static file, open input file, final scanner KB. Okay? So, what I need to do here is a couple of things. Number one, I need to ask the user for the name of the input file. I need to read that input file in, and I need to make sure that the input file is an actual file that exists on my hard drive, right? I don't want you to give me Steiner.txt as the file name when we all know you probably have that on your hard drive, but I don't want to know what's in it, okay? I want to make sure that the name you give me is an actual file name. So I'm going to do that in this fashion. I'm going to say string FN, which just simply stands for file name, okay? And then I'm going to declare a file reference here called file INF, just like before, and I'm going to set it to null, okay? I'm going to do this in a big ugly do while. Okay, so do, and then the while is going to flow over to there. Do SOP blah 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 into the name of the input file. FN gets kb.next line. So a couple of things here, right? Number one, we're presuming that I didn't check preconditions here, right? But we would obviously have preconditions here. That make sure we have the scanner object, because if we don't have a valid scanner object, this is going to crash and burn me right here, right? As a null pointer exception, okay? Also, I need to make sure that there is no carriage return left on the input buffer somewhere along the way. And in this case, since this is the first time I'm using it, I'm fine. But we want to make sure that there's no carriage return, right? If there's a carriage return, I'm going to have a problem. So that just gave me something you typed on the keyboard, okay? Now that something can be one of two things. It can literally be something like nums.txt, or it can be something like this, c:/users/downloads/nums.txt, like that. So it can be the full path name, or it can just literally be nums.txt. The big difference here is if we just type nums.txt, then it needs to be in the same file folder that we're running our code out of. In our case, it'll be at the same level as doc, the PDF, and lab 10 or whatever our lab is called, right? So in our case, what we'll have is right, for our next lab, we'll have lab 10. Inside of lab 10, we'll have docs, we'll have some PDF, we'll have lab 10 lowercase for the packaging stuff, and then we'll have nums.txt or whatever it is right there. We okay with that? Okay. So, this just gave me nums.txt, so now I need to do two things. Number one, before I can check to see if the file is there, I need to create a file object. And if you look right here, I'm going to use the file string path name. Creates a new file instance by converting the given path name string into an abstract path name. Essentially what it's going to do is it's going to take that string and wrapper it as a file object. Okay? It's going to take that string and wrapper it as a file object. And hey, notice that it tells me that if you gave me nothing, then you're going to get a null pointer exception, right? Which is going to be bad for us. That's why we want to make sure our input buffer is clean. Okay, so how do we do this? Well, it's just simply write INF gets new file, and the file name we read from the keyboard. Everybody okay with that? Okay. So what do I know at this blue line I just wrote right there? I know two things. Actually, I know a lot of things, but I know two main things that it deals with this. What are one of those two things I know, Tom?
User entered a file name.
User entered a file name. And what's the other thing I know, Paul? I was waiting for mid-yawn, Paul.
I don't actually know.
I took that file name and I tried to make a file object out of it.
Okay.
Right? That's what we did, right? We got a file name and we tried to make a file object out of it.
Okay.
Okay? Now, that file object probably succeeded, but hey, there are some checks for us. So if we come back here, and I do that, and I put that, and I push that.
So do we have to put the whole nums on text or just the name, however the name of the file is? We put the file name.
Well, it's a variable called file name.
But like when we do like
All the methods I have here, I have a get path, I have these checks that say is it a file, is it a directory, is it hidden, what's the length of the string, what's the length of the file name, right? More importantly, the one that I really care about,
Exists.
okay? So what does this mean? It just means the file name that you gave me, is that the file name that's on my hard drive that I'm looking for, right? And so perfect example, because I'm, fat, big bone as my mom says, I have fat fingers. And I fat finger type, as you can see in class all the time, right? So I'm gonna go to type nums.text, and I'm gonna type nums.test, because the TS is right above the X key, right? So when I go to do that, it's gonna say, yeah, no, nums.test does not exist. There's a nums.text, but .text and .test are not the same thing.
and you don't have to do any rolling or stuff there. It's like this is built into the stuff.
And so I do that by simply right here saying, while INF dot exists equal false or not INF exists. Right? Those do the exact same thing. One's just a little bit more explicit than the other, right? Because exists is going to return true or false. If the file exists, then it's going to return true. Okay? If the file doesn't exist, then it's going to return false. We want to do this when the file does not exist. We want to do this when we get a false back, because we want to come back around and say, yeah, nice try, try again. Okay? Now, we don't do any of that try again stuff here. We just reprompt them, and we stay here until we get a file name that's in the place you told me it is and actually has that file. That makes sense to everybody. Okay? So, go ahead, Kyle.
I was gonna ask, what happens if the user does something stupid and like gives you a name of a JPEG or an exe file?
Then it will still exist. We will just have problems later on, right? All we're trying to do is say, hey, you told me nums.txt exists in this directory on your hard drive. you lying to me or not? That's all we're doing, right? We don't know what's in that file. This is a really good question. We'll deal with it in a minute, Kyle. We don't know what's in that file. We just know there's a file there with that name, right? That's all this code tells me. And this black line, it just tells me I've got a file with the name you gave me in the directory you told me it's in, but I know nothing else about it other than it exists. So in our case, we're gonna have to live in, again, the happy part of Stu land to say, hey, we're gonna only deal with files that we can deal with, right? But if they give me a JPEG file and it's where it's supposed to be, where you told me it's gonna be, it exists, right? So now at the end of this, I'm just simply gonna say return INF, okay? Because you gave me a valid file name, I'm just gonna send that back to main, okay? Right? So all I got out of this is, yes, there's a file on your hard drive in this place, named this thing, okay? Questions?
What's the difference between throw and throws? I mean,
Throw is when you create a new exception. Throws is when you're taking an exception that exists and kicking the can to the next person.
or telling the compiler to shut up.
Yeah, in that sense, yes. Okay? Other questions? Yes, Paul?
So how, like, if we're not in the happy part of Stu land, how would we deal with a
We
user
would do
input and
the
all?
other checks. There's a bunch of more methods in the file class that we'd say, is it a directory? Is it a real file? Is it a readable file? Is it a writable file? There's a bunch of checks
Okay.
that we can do on it. In our case, we're gonna just take it on faith. Stu said that we're gonna get a good file name and we're gonna get a good file.
Okay.
Right? And I only do that right now, Paul, because I don't wanna muddy the waters that are muddy enough with other crap like giving you a JPEG file or giving you a, there's a wonderful file called a PGM file, which is just numbers, that you can actually use in a PGM viewer to display a picture.
Oh, yeah.
So it's pretty cool. But I'm trying not to muddy the waters with any of that crap right now. In our case, we're gonna get those numbers all one per line, like so over there, right? Okay. So now, I know that I have the file object from that method right there stored in the variable called INF right here. Can we all agree on that? Right?
Yeah.
And I took this right here, and I returned it, and it just happens to be the same name, and I stored that file object inside the reference called INF right here, okay? So now what I wanna do is I wanna take this reference, and I wanna wrap it in a scanner object, okay? And I'm simply gonna do that by just simply saying scanner fin, which stands for file input, that's all it stands for. Fin is file input in my mind, okay? Scanner fin gets new scanner INF, okay? Now, this line right here takes care of the thing that says, hey, potentially this file doesn't exist. And I'm saying, bullshit, it does exist because I made sure it existed over here. But the compiler's not smart enough to say, oh, that's Stu Steiner's code, I trust this guy. Or it's stupid enough, one of the two, right? That's Stu Steiner's code, I'm gonna trust this guy. So that's what this just simply says is, hey, trust me, we made sure it exists, so shut the hell up and don't tell me anything about it. Okay? Questions on that? So now, I've got a scanner object. Literally, I've got a scanner object, and that scanner object worked exactly like the keyboard scanner object right above it does. Except that this one reads from the keyboard, this one reads from this file right here. So when I said scanner fin gets new scanner, what it did was it put a marker right up there at the very top line of that file, and it said, okay, I'm a scanner object, I'm ready to read. Okay? So now, what we want to do is we want to read through that file, figure out how many lines are in it, and then make an array of that size. Okay? And then actually fill that array with those numbers from that file. Okay, so we got 2 steps to do here. First thing we're gonna do is we're gonna read through that file. We're gonna read through the file and count the lines. Okay? We're gonna read through the file and count the lines. Okay? Then we're gonna come back and we're gonna read, and so then we're gonna make an array of that size. Okay? Of whatever count was, right? In this case, how many numbers over there? 2, 4, 6, 8. Who do we appreciate?
Stu.
10, 12, 14, 16, 17. So we're going to make an array of size 17. Does the camera really add 10 pounds, Garrett? Do I look just huge on the camera?
Nah, you look great.
Okay. You got the filter on to make me look good? Good.
Phase 2.
Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to run through that and count 17 lines, make an array of that count number, and then we're going to come back through and fill that array with those values from the file. Is everybody with me? Okay. So to count those numbers, count those lines, we're going to say int count get file utils dot count records, comma, fin, comma, 1. And I will explain to you what that means here in a minute. Okay? But over here, I'm going to write count records, and I'm going to do it on the side of, right? This would be below the open input file stuff, but it's still in the same class, right? So here it's going to be public static int count records scanner final scanner fin final int lines per. Okay, so what is this lines per? In this case, it's lines per is 1, meaning each line makes up an individual record, right? Each number will be an individual record in that array. Don't ask questions yet, okay? Think of it this way. What if in that file we had this? Blaine, what's your last name?
Gann, G-A-N-N.
And Paul, what's your last name?
Lawler.
L-A-W-L-E-R? Okay, so let's say we had this, okay? Clearly, those 2 lines make up a single person. Your first name and your last name, right? So in that case, what we would do is we would count these lines, there's 6 of them. We would divide by lines per, which is 2, to say that there are 3 people in that file. Does that make sense? Okay? Wait, you're not giving me any emotion. You're killing me, man. Okay? So we would take the number of lines we counted, divide by lines per to say, hey, this represents the number of records, not the number of lines, but the number of records in the file. In our case, over there, that would mean there are 3 people's names in that file. There are 6 lines, but there are 3 people's names. Over here, it's going to be, there are 17 lines in the file, and there are 17 records in the file, because each line is considered a record. Does that make sense to people? Okay? So over here, what we're going to do is we're going to do this. First thing we're going to do is we're going to say int count get 0, right? Obviously, we're going to do our preconditions. And our preconditions are going to be like before. Fin's not null, and lines per is less than 1, right? Because we can't have negative lines per, and you can't have 0 lines per. So we're going to check, make sure fin's not null, and lines per is not less than 1, okay? So we're going to create count, and then we're going to do the following, okay? While fin dot has next, meaning while there is something in the file for me to read, not next line, next item. That's what that says, but there's no next item. Has next means, well, there is something in the file to read. That is different from has next line, okay? And I will tell you why. I can represent this file like this, or I can represent this file like this, okay? With the numbers all in one row, space separated. Here they're carriage return separated, here they're space separated. It's the same concept though. White space is a carriage return, a tab, or a space. So I can take this, put them all on one line. This is going to read them, okay? If we did has next line, it would not read them because there's no more lines after the first one, right? There's still 17 numbers there, but there are no more lines because we have them all on one line.
Are there times where has next line is a good thing, where something you want to use as that has next?
We want to use has next.
So
Correct.
with has next, as long as there's space in between.
White space of some kind. Space,
whether
tab,
it's-
carriage return.
Okay.
Right?
So it'll separate those into their own
Yeah,
items.
space tab, carriage return, right? Go ahead, Blaine.
Will it read carriage returns after your,
Yes,
after your shit's finished? After
Yes.
All right.
yes. So you know how we have the carriage return problem when we're doing with the keyboard? If we're reading numbers and strings out of the file, we have the same carriage return problem. It's a scanner object, man. There's no difference, just where we're coming from, right? In this case, we're just reading numbers, so it doesn't matter. Okay? Okay, so we're gonna say, well, fin dot has next, which is just a look ahead to say, is there more stuff in the file or not? Okay? That's all it is. That's all has next does. Is there more stuff in the file or not? Okay, so if that comes back true, there's stuff in the file, and what it does here again is this black line looks and says, is there something on this line I can read?
Yes.
Or am I at the end of file marker? Because what happens is, when we read through this file, this will eventually hit a magical thing hidden from us called the end of file marker that will tell it there's no more things in the file because we're at the end of the file. Yes, Paul?
Is there a limit as to how much there can be in the file?
How big the file can be?
Yeah.
Let me just say this. This last weekend, we had the Spokane Mayor's Cup. And one of the problems was you were given you were given a log file which had IP addresses in it. And you had to determine where the IP address came from, looked it up as in a reverse lookup. You know, 146.187.0.0 is an Eastern IP address, right?
Sure.
So you were given 146.187, and then you had to reverse look that up in a table to say, no, that's the USA. And then you had to count them and determine what country was making the most hits to the IP, what country is making the most hits into your system, right? That was one of the problems. The log file they gave us was 12 gigabytes in size.
Wait, what?
Damn.
Okay.
That's a lot of IPs.
Yeah.
They gave us a small one, they gave us one for 50 that you could do by hand. But if you wanted to test it against something real, they had an actual 2 gig, 4 gig, 6 gig, 10 gig, and 12 gigabyte log files that they ran your stuff against. So the answer is the amount of memory you have in your system and hard drive space, man.
All right.
So you can have like a gigantic file if you really want
So
to.
my
Get a
team,
terabyte.
my team of women was the only team to solve that problem for 12 gigabyte log file.
Holy crap!
Yeah. And they wrote a couple of scripts for it. Did a beautiful job on it. They did it in pairs, like Blaine and you working together. Blaine pulled out the IP address and did the lookup, and then stripped them all out, did the lookup, and then passed you, what was it? Blaine did a bunch of, one woman did cleaning of it, just pulled out the IP address, passed it to another person that did the count of it, and then she passed it to a third person that did the reverse lookup.
Okay.
Took them 4.5 hours.
What?
That's
4.5 hours.
A lot of hours.
Yeah, it was, but it was great to see that happen. I'm out of time, we'll pick up with this tomorrow.
Hey,
We'll get the new lab tomorrow. The new lab's gonna take some explanation.